All right. Hello, Peach Pit fans. Hello, Meredith. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Jennifer. How are you
Hello.
today? Hi, Rachel.
Rachel, you are our third guest on Peach Pit. So welcome.
Ooh, I didn't even realize that. That's awesome. Okay, number three. I like
Yes.
it.
Yes, it's usually a sacred space for Meredith and I to air out
A
our
therapy
issues
session.
with the fitness industry.
I love it. I love it.
But there'll probably be no shortage of that today. But just welcome, and we're so glad to have you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to be here. Excited to be here.
And I think a great place to start is just like your introduction, and then we can get into like why we thought this would be a great conversation to have. So please start.
So I am Rachel Garmon Williams, if you want the full name. They, them pronouns. And I have been a trainer for just about 10 years now, personal trainer for just about 10 years, both in DC and then now in Richmond, under my own fitness company now of Yes and Fitness, being a lot of specializing in corrective exercise and specialty movements and lifting. And then as my hobby, like I do compete in Olympic lifting and recreationally run when I decide to. Idea. But yeah, that's me in a short nutshell.
Yes. I mean, I would add a couple things to that because I've known you for so long, but you're also like one of the first guests on the Think Fit, Be Fit podcast ever. So, shout out to sister brother Think Fit, Be Fit.
Yes. Hey, I will talk about squats and bodies all day.
Yes, and speaking of squats and bodies, we decided to have this conversation because there is hopefully a new trend in fitness, which is focusing on or welcoming gender neutral ideas and spaces for fitness lovers or even newbie fitness enthusiasts or and part of this podcast is to really talk about trends. And sometimes that's veered us into the direction of you should always do this, and male bodies do this, and female bodies do this. And now we're kind of making a different turn in this fitness space and saying, what is special about gender neutral fitness, why it should be a trend, and why, what can we do to talk about it, make it more common knowledge. And for me personally, I would love to be less clumsy in my use of pronouns. And, I mean, I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of questions. So
Here for them. Here for them.
good. So let's start with, I think, the elephant in the room, which is like, how do we be less clumsy when approaching a general. See, that was clumsy as
That was
fuck.
perfect, Jennifer. That was perfect. You planned that. You totally planned that.
Yeah. I think a lot of it is also even this moment right now, right? A sincerity of it. There's sincerity and like not knowing a thing and being willing to go, I don't know this. What's the correct answer? I think sincerity goes a very long way in things, or genuinely taking the time to ask someone. Like they think there is this mystification that we have to somehow know all the answers. And we forget that even, with working with like folks with disabilities or whatever, we can just ask a question of someone to be like, what works for you? And it's little things like that that make it less clumsy of being that, trying being like, oh, okay. And then knowing, right, you're doing the work on your own end versus someone else's end, but like asking that question of like, what would you prefer I use? Because some people's pronouns are also depend on the space they're in.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it's a lot of like sometimes you'll see like intake forms will have the pronouns. A lot of the language has shifted to, and like I've seen in a lot of things, and I've shifted it myself to say, what are pronouns you're comfortable using in this space? Some individuals, it may depend on the space where they're comfortable or who they're around, what they're comfortable using. Otherwise, there's something to, they'll sometimes keep safer pronouns that are like, oh, people in my life don't know I'm out or this way, or this space is, not safe. So I'm going to be, please refer to me this way. But if we're one-on-one, it's this. And that sometimes goes, a little bit of a long way with that. So there is, I think, like anything approached from, sincerity and try, that space always, even clumsy, comes out right and comes out better than not. Like,
that's good to know. That's helpful for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where are you on your journey of blending fitness and coming out and, having non-binary, like, as part of your identity?
Yeah, it's been definitely, I think it's, as you like, with everyone's story is different. Like a lot of mine is like things I knew and was aware of, and it took a while. Like it took me a while even to find with, beyond gender identity, but sexuality, of saying like I'm pansexual, meaning like I was into everyone. I did marry a man, but who is bisexual. But it was that for me was like finding that discovery. But it was also, I've never liked gender. Things have always rubbed me the wrong way. And it was just taking a while to figure that out. And I think there is such a fun space that's existed in the world now that allows, it's okay to not fit those categories. It's okay to find a term. It's okay to not find a term. And so for a while, I was floating in what I would just kind of call that gender queer space of like, I don't know what exactly this is. So my pronouns for a while shifted to she, they, and being like, I kind of flip between both, of definitely I am more female presenting. That is how I am present. That's where I compete, is in female weight categories. But it was kind of over the last few years, just for myself, deciding to give permission that it's okay that at 34 to be like, yeah, you know what, I am non-binary, and I like that, of just kind of flitting between the middle. And so that's been interesting on a fitness journey of being in a competitive sport that is gendered. There's not exactly a non-binary category in weightlifting. So it's kind of just been sticking with what I know, which is the weight categories I know are on that female side of the scale versus the male side of the scale. And that's, just, I think in the smaller competitions, they will sometimes have non-binary categories, but for a lot of weightlifting, it is by gender and then by weight class. And so there's not that, but some races have started having non-binary categories. So I ran an 8K in the fall with a friend of mine just casually, and there was a non-binary category, and it was like, that's nice. Like that's felt very fun to just have that space to be like, oh, I don't have to be like this or that. It can be, this middle ground. So for me, it's been a lot of being, I think it fell into my fitness journey as well, of being like, fitness doesn't have to be one thing. It doesn't have to look one way. And on that same scale of like gender doesn't have to look one way or be one way. And I think that's been a huge, where this has come into fitness more, is we're at that cross section where a lot of people are with anti-diet culture and getting rid of fat phobia and fitness, is you've had this, fitness doesn't have to be a scale or a number. And so you've had this opening up of like, it can encompass a whole lot of things. Someone can come in just to get stronger. We don't have to worry about getting smaller or shrinking ourselves. And so I think as I was kind of going through, what does fitness look like for me as I'm getting into my 30s and beyond versus, gender.
Yeah. That's so refreshing. I mean, it's so, when you're talking about it in the fitness space and how we've had these ideas of what fitness has to mean and relating that to gender. And I just feel like it's so open and fresh, like with fitness for sure. And also for anybody who wants to explore the boxes that we kind of just find ourselves in, without having ever questioned it, unless we have. And so I think that that's just such a great perspective to think about how those are related. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
Yes, it was, I like the refreshing take on, bodies in general. I think that's one of the things we really bonded over way back when anyways. Not, I think you and I have bonded over a frustration of sport being, just trying to force things into boxes, and we've, and we and you helping me with my with an Olympic weightlifting journey. And we had so many conversations about anatomy and why, you know, sometimes my anatomy might be tough for certain parts of a lift, and why I can't, you know, follow that cookie cutter program of, you know, land like this, explode like that. So yeah, what it's interesting, circuitous thing we're doing here.
It circles back around. It all comes back around.
Yeah. So go ahead.
And I was just going to say, I didn't even know that they had 9 non-binary categories in races and in weightlifting in certain competitions. That's a very cool thing. And I wonder if do you feel like that's sort of the future? Because I do feel like there's so much strife right now over how transgender athletes should compete. And I know a lot of people feel it's a heated debate for a lot of people. And but that's such a nice way of, or nice, it just seems like it's very welcoming. You know what I mean? It's very like, you can choose how you want to compete. It doesn't mean you can't compete or
correct. Yeah, it's definitely like, I think having a non-binary category fits for those individuals, and it doesn't always solve. There's also a call, like in some federations, to say, well, what if you just made it all weight classes? Like, gender out of it, because we also, and this is like, I know Jen and I have gone on these discussions deeply of, we often limit AFAB, assigned female at birth, people by saying, oh, you can only get this strong, when that's very much incorrect. It's just there's to training and equipment. So what happens if you kind of open up weight categories? But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, with transgender athletes and non-binary athletes, like there's a lot of folks that want to put transgender athletes in a non-binary category, which is not helpful for those transgender individuals, because they've told you that they're a female or a male.
Right.
A non-binary individual is kind of like, not really in either of those categories. You know, so there's a lot of, you know, back and forth in a lot of the communities of what fits. And a lot of it is just getting to that acceptance space in sports. I think for a lot of people don't realize how long the Olympics have allowed transgender athletes to compete. It's been since the early 2000s. We know about the athletes. There have been a lot of athletes that are not out. And a lot of those hormone restrictions are actually more limited for even AFAB females. There's Caster Nevins can't compete in the Olympics because her natural testosterone is too high compared to the Olympics for hormones. She's not transgender, but she can't compete.
But just naturally, genetically, her hormone level, her testosterone level is too high. So they do actually test Olympic athletes. And if they fall outside of, even if it's their genetic,
correct.
Wow.
Yeah,
I didn't know
this is a highly controversial topic.
Yeah,
because it has
because that doesn't seem, well, I don't know.
It has it narrows the category of female, male, and it has leaned towards certain races, as far as like who has too much testosterone and
is not allowed to compete. So could somebody take something then
they'll often say that, like, for Caster Nevins, they've told her to suppress her hormones, but you're currently asking a woman to suppress her natural, you know, because it's
not fair. I don't.
And a lot of it is the Olympics made the category like too limited, because, like, you know, bodies have testosterone in them, like AFAB bodies have testosterone in them. So you have like
AFAB. Hold on.
Assigned. So a lot of terms you can use. AFAB is assigned female at birth, and then you have AMAB, which is assigned male at birth.
Okay.
Which is a way to kind of quantify, because you will have non-binary athletes that compete in cross sports and things like that. So sometimes people will be like assigned male at birth or assigned female at birth to kind of create a understanding of the anatomy, your base anatomy you're working with, if that makes sense. Which comes into play, I would say, very little in fitness, as a lot of people try and make it a big deal. And it's like, bodies are all different at the base level.
Sure, right.
But yeah, I mean, so when you look at categories, like the Olympics have allowed transgender athletes for a very long time. We've only recently started caring. You've only recently started having athletes be more out. You know, and so
before they were competing, transgender athletes were competing, but it wasn't necessarily a publicly known thing. So people weren't so up in arms about it or whatever. Their opinions about it didn't matter because they were competing and you didn't even know it.
Yep. And
Okay.
it's also a fascinating thing of right now you have a lot of these arguments about transgender women who, again, we all went through puberty. That is what going on hormones is. It is going through puberty all over again, entirely. So you lose everything, go through all the hormone fun all over again.
Wow.
That is what it sucks. But no one talks about transgender men that are winning in sports. We talk about
women who have changed
talk
to
about transgender
men
women
who are winning. Right. Okay.
We talk about that, and there's often not
Right.
also we also assume women are weaker, so it's always that quantifier. So never in the conversation do we include transgender men in sports that are women. We always kind of quantify it as the weaker.
Gotcha.
This like cross mix, but yeah, it makes for, as sports are trying to figure out what fits and what creates equality, it kind of is having your male, female, non-binary categories, and kind of for folks to try and figure out where that fits for them, and because a lot of athletic sports have switched to, we'll just put all transgender athletes in a non-binary category, which is denying who they are on that hand. So it's a lot of like sitting and going, okay, but it's also on that same vein of like talking where fitness is at, is saying that women, AFAB, female, naturally born females are also stronger than we think, and we never accept that. We just assume they're naturally weaker and slower. So they have
because they so often haven't had the same resources and haven't been pushed in the same way that men have, and had the same, like, it's cool or it's great if you want to explore that and get as strong as you possibly can. I think that that's so interesting. We think that it's like a causative thing, like just because you are female just definitely means that you are going to be weaker, when I think that that's a fascinating aspect of things too.
There's an interesting parallel here to youth sports and age brackets. So like, let's say Meredith and I were born in the same year, but like 6 months apart. When we were 13, that is a huge,
huge difference.
Like huge difference, potentially in skill, in coordination, emotional, like maturity. And you have these two kids, just narrowed into this group on age and birthday alone, and you're potentially holding back younger kids, basically, who may be advanced, or being the best, with the best environment being everybody competes on the same like level. Like you group people based on their ability and awareness of the game. So in a team sport, like that's really important. So I don't, and I see so much, like from my time like working in sports, like I see so much benefit to getting rid of age birthday brackets. So I think there could be a parallel, conversation with younger athletes and like, different sports, and taking away that bracket and look at, I mean, I think that would do a lot for women's advancement. I think, I think if you put them in if you put these, main genders, I guess, in the same like competitive environment, I think you could get some outliers there that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise, and have advancements for them versus, and I don't know. Anyways, that's just a parallel that came up in my head.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of room for that. And I grew up, when I went to middle school, there was a girl that competed in wrestling. There was no female wrestling, so she was on the men's team, but she also would experience people, and she was a very good wrestler, but she would also often deal with wrestlers did not want to wrestle her.
There was a girl in my high school that was on the men's wrestling team, and she was also in my weightlifting class, and she was strong. She could bench like a 135 in high school, and I was like, wow. But I would, if I still knew her, had I would be so curious to hear what her experience, because when I was in high school, I didn't think anything about it other than, she just wrestles on the men's team because there isn't a women's team, right? So but I wonder what that experience was like for her. And yeah.
Yeah, it's very fascinating. I have a friend whose daughter is playing football, and like she's still playing football like on the teams, and like in middle through into middle school, like is on the football team playing. She loves it and it's great. And it's like, but you know, her mom is also worried like, when does that stop? When is she no longer going to be allowed on the football team? Because she, you know, that is like, we're not, you know, they'll sometimes bring on female soccer players to kick to be on a football team.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But very rarely do you see if, you know, females invited to be on the football team, like in other positions aside from kicker.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering where, gosh, yeah, let's take that. Let's not go down that road.
I know there's like so many different things that are so exciting to like, interesting to explore. Cause like, I'm like,
yeah,
but why is that? Is it because they've reached a certain, because they're now past puberty and it's just seen as like, they're going to get injured more readily, or it's because of the camaraderie of the men and they're like, there's a woman here and we don't like that, we can't have a woman in our locker room, or we can't have a woman in our
I mean I have a client that is a wide receiver coach, you know, and in Virginia basically high school football is pretty big around here, and you'll have wide receiver coaches just like a college team, right? It's not just like three dads hanging out, right? And yeah, he had a female on the squad, but turns out she was looking for male attention. She wasn't there to play. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think it all fits into that, like this gender spectrum, and like what we have we've not really paid attention to the differences of it over the years. I think it's very recent thing.
Just accepted it. Yeah.
We've just been like, all right, this is what it is. And so like more fitness, especially as fitness has gotten into these other realms of being like, it doesn't have to be weight centric or, you know, this perfect body centric, that you can just have other goals. I think it's opened the doors to the conversations finally about gender to say, oh, we've been purposely stereotyping, categorizing, and missed all along that we don't exactly have all the answers. You have women winning 100-mile races or ultras, like outright winning the race, not just like period, because the women are endurance athlete, but like we're now finally seeing people test that and go, oh, we have sports all wrong. We have what fitness is a little backwards. And so you have this space finally for other genders because to excel in sports and be involved in sports.
Well, I think this is a perfect transition to talk about those high barriers, you know. You know, we know there's high barriers for fitness in so many forms. Like on this podcast, we've talked about, you know, some gyms just not being super welcoming to people of various sizes. And I've seen on like my gyms, like Instagram, the owner like reprimanding people for like taking pictures of overweight folks and like making them feel uncomfortable in various ways. And he's like, no, we don't do that here. Like, this is not that kind of place at all. That's just one example of a high barrier. There's high barriers. You know, last episode, we talked about the high barriers to women being changed dramatically just a number of decades ago in our lifetime. And, you know, so where are the high barriers now for those who are gender neutral, trans, non-binary? You know, what's going to keep them out of a place to work on their body in a productive way, like a gym?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is that sense of community, because you also even get that with race and a difference of a very, you know, and it is that sense of, if that feels like a community space, and if you face that, you are always going to feel comfortable in a space that has someone who looks like you or seems like you. That's always going to immediately create a comfort zone of, this feels like me. And I think you often see it a lot right in gym culture. You will see a lot of very white gyms, and it's not that racist, and they might be very anti-racist in all their messaging, but if there's no, like, there's not that sense of community. That same thing is also will happen with the queer community, is that often they're going to go to a place that feels welcoming. They know people there, they know someone else who looks like them there, is a big barrier of like that visibility. So it's also for gyms is visibility in hiring practices and making, you know, a clear, you know, not token hiring. Everyone knows when you're being tokened, but making it a this is an accepting place in terms of like lingo on forms for employment or intake forms of like, do you have pronoun accepting pronoun language on there? Are your forms talking about gender things? You know, are you looking to work on X? A lot of gyms have that entry form that is like, oh, what are you looking to work on? And it's targeted towards gender versus why are you here? So it's that space of does it feel comfortable, but it is also that visibility of action. I will say that like for me, whenever I travel, I'm looking for a gym, like I know how I'm going to dress based on what type of gym I'm going to. There are gyms that I'm going to be much more comfortable being myself and wearing pride gear that I know or have a lot of like, even if it is slightly rainbow washing, but at least they're talking against legislation. Like right now, Virginia, they keep trying to pass a lot of anti-trans legislation or LGBTQIA plus issues. A gym that is being like, I don't even care for losing other members. We care. We actually stand against these things. That we're here for you. That makes a lot of difference to be comfortable in a space versus a gym that has a lot of pictures of their clients and like half, bodies everywhere, talking like they have the joke bathroom signs of like, I think there was one gym I was at in Virginia Beach that it's like the snatches is the female bathroom.
Oh my gosh.
It's like, wow.
Really?
Face palm
Yes.
emoji.
Wow.
That's fun. Just gonna like anytime I've kind of just gone there, it's just been like I am just gonna headphones in from the whole experience.
Wow.
But it's also like, there is that visibility of the space, what, does the space look like? And like, yes, sure, sometimes you have that issue of pride washing where a company is like, well, for the month of June, we've got a pride flag up and that's it. But someone who has it year round is going to make a difference that you're standing by that the whole year. That you are elevating, those trainers and you are finding people that look like each other and recognizing that space. So the gym I work out of, because I rent a space to train, we have a private studio upstairs. So I also know that I'm bringing in someone who is insecure in fitness in their body, that I can have that space for just us one-on-one. I can ask that no one else come into that space because we're trying to figure it out. So a lot of it is on like language inclusivity, and it doesn't necessarily mean immediately everyone flocks. But it is it comfortable, and is it also everyone's on board with that? Is it all the other trainers in the space are also on board with asking pronouns, even if they're not training a client that is, but just checking in to be like, oh, what are your pronouns? That makes a big difference. And I train a few transgender clients, and I can tell you that a time that a client made a comment to me, but loud enough for my client to hear it by saying like, wow, she's a really good boxer, made my client's day, being that she was presenting as female in a gym, like still working out in a gym, and it was that other trainer knowing the pronouns and knowing the way to how she that made that day, and that immediately made her more comfortable with other people in the space, because everyone was involved in that, like, oh, this feels comfortable and this feels fun. And so it's a lot of work on the end of a gym. It's a lot of work on the end of trainers to create that space.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking as a business owner, I was like, okay, gotta add something to my forms at the minimum here. And yeah, I mean, I'm such I like to customize everything, so I don't see many more changes for my business, but definitely the forms and yeah, just seeing how that comes up with people, because when I first meet someone, I'm asking them to go deep with me on many subjects. So yeah, I think
it depends on the situation, but like if you've got forms that are like, what pronouns do you want me to use? Are you comfortable using in my space? What comfortable, that goes a long way. Obviously there's sometimes that we have to sign legal forms with like legal names, but also legal space for a name you'd like to call, nickname or name you'd like to call you. Makes it different because sometimes people they have to sign the legal name that is not their name. So giving them a space to sign that, but also write in, here's what I would like you to call me, creates that space. Or like even, for Jen, for you, it's talking about the body and muscle ways, takes out that this is, gender language about the body. At the end of the day, a body, we got muscles, we got tendons, ligaments, we got bones, all of these things that we can kind of refer to. And just kind of creating that space and language. And that's where a lot of folks have used the AFAB and AMAB terms, so that if I still need to know if my client's on their cycle or dealing with that type of thing, that makes a difference in training around a cycle, so that I'm prepared for it, but we don't need to talk about it because I know that that's going to feel very disconnected for them to have that cycle in those times. But I know that they're going to have it, which still affects training and strength training. Whether someone's on hormones or not, but that kind of comes up. But it's creating that open space for language. And I think in fitness, it's having the conversations that are better anyway to have, which is, what are your goals? Taking it away from that scale, or taking away from the assumption of someone wants their body to look one way or the other. For a lot of folks, it is that getting in the gym. And now I will find for transgender clients, there is that desire to say, I would like, more of a feminine shape, or I would like to build up my chest, because not everyone has access to gender affirming care. So we can do that with fitness, but it's creating that space to say, great, let's have that conversation, let's have that, what do you want to work on? And give them that space to say, here's what I want to work on, and not have to me impose like, oh, well, I think we should do X, Y, Z, or I think it should be this way, if that you're involved in this as much as I am.
Yeah. What have you had a positive response from some of your marketing in this realm?
I have, yes. I mean, it was definitely, when I started doing the class, which we paused, and the class I'm leading, we paused until August. But it was immediately a lot of response, even for people that couldn't do it, but just a space that was going to be solely this inclusive space. I think there is often this, we want everything to be accessible, but sometimes we need to have these closed in spaces that can just be these conversations that the folks in this class can have these conversations around each other, and they all know they're within that community, and they all know that that's staying in this room.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, I think like you were saying, I mean, you just don't, it's so nice to have a closed space like that. It can be so scary for anyone, to go into a gym where they don't know the people, and they feel like they're getting stared at, or like, you know what I mean? And that might not be even the case, but like sometimes we just all feel nervous. And so when I could definitely see how that would be so helpful to have like some classes that are just very specific to transgender, non-binary people. Yeah.
And it creates a space, right? I mean, I've always had a fitness philosophy that's, sure, I love having clients that last for a while, but I'm also always okay with a client that I'm training to go into the gym by themselves. And so that class is very much designed on like circuit based, but I can teach you a lot of things that when you are comfortable to go into a gym, that you feel confident, that you don't really have to worry about asking someone a question if you're not comfortable, but
right.
Go in and be there. But also inviting in, like, we're looking at fitness gear and what do we wear in a gym, if it's a wide range. And so giving permission to be like, this is also a space where you can figure out what you want to wear to the gym. We're going to be comfortable with you, but it's going to take a bit to figure out what do you want to work out in, what do you want to wear, because that creates, because also you have spaces where folks might be using binders for their, so giving them a space that they can choose to not wear the binder to work out, but a lot of them will work out in it because, again, if they don't want a chest binder.
Okay.
Sorry. Binding, holding the breasts down so they're not visible. So that's giving that space of like, that changes how we're going to move that day, because that is a compression, the compression piece on. But also some folks don't want to work out with that on, but that definitely means a really secure space for them that feels comfortable. For that, okay to not wear that.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on like gender neutral locker rooms?
I think they're great. I think it's also in general, I mean, for the most part, aside from, I would say, you're like senior citizens that are very comfortable in their bodies wandering around a locker room. In any gym. I find that in any gym, no matter the gym, there's always folks of a certain age that are, you know what, I hope to be them. I think it creates I think it creates a much better space in a gym anyway, because you also just have this, like, if it goes in, like, you're just designed to go into a locker room and change, go to the bathroom and shower and move on. Like, if you just have a space of, like, there are some facilities that have the, like, separate showers that, like, lock, that you can change, shower, and, like, then get back out. And it was like, that is so much better than what I even called, like, the open stall showers, where we just have a flimsy, barely working for any of us. Um, like, and so I think it creates just more privacy in general that a lot of people want.
Yeah.
And a lot of people desire to just have a little bit of a separate space. I think it creates a much more open. There was a theater I went to in Seattle that the way they did their bathrooms, they said one of them was like just stalls and urinals, and no anyone could use either bathroom. It was just letting you know that if you wanted a urinal, go this way. If you didn't care, either option works. And so I think it might be a space, and it also, just from running a gym, having bathrooms, changing rooms, showers, separate facilities will smooth so many things over. Because the backup of locker room and, like, dealing with locker rooms and towels and trying to find all of that, I think if it actually would simplify a lot of, like, gym management facilities.
Yeah. Like going to like a hip restaurant or like a club, the bathrooms are interesting because they're all going towards gender neutral, where you just have like the sinks in one room and the mirrors and then separate stalls. Like,
yep.
Yeah, I was staying at a hotel recently where it was like the bathrooms were just, it's just that any human can go. I know they were all, individual bathrooms, but it's like, that's nice. Like, it doesn't really matter. Do we care? Like, it's, yeah, any human can go in this bathroom.
Yep. I remember years ago, there was a dance hall in Baltimore that was the same way. It was like 2 doors to enter, and it was just a long row of stalls and sinks. Luckily, it was door was actually closed. You couldn't see through the stall. But it was just, yep, anyone can use these bathrooms. We're still dancing. Go right back out. You don't need to down in the bathroom.
Yeah. I want to circle back to what we were talking about with the Olympics and racing and things like that, which is really hormones. What do you say to people with such a limited idea about how much hormones one person should have versus another? Personally, I've looked into it, and I just don't think that I don't think the science is perfect on it enough for everybody to just like hold such a strong ground one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of my, like, feelings on that are, like, the same way. Like, we can't figure out, like, there was a study done recently that was talking about how a lot of the barriers, the thing in fitness that actually is the difference is access to training at a young age. More so than hormones, it is access to equipment, and training changes the game on how you will excel later, or how you excel in a sport is actually just pure access and practice in a thing. And so I think it's very fascinating, like, when you have the Olympics. So the Olympics do have a very strict standard, which I think is the most strict of any of the sports that allow transgender athletes. Of, like, you have athletes that are not able to compete because they're like, I'm just naturally this is what my hormones are doing. And I think we give a lot of more credit sometimes to hormones, and hormones. It's also, right, even for females and AFAB individuals, that hormone cycle, they're changing depending on when you decide to
test, for sure.
And also depending on when someone is in perimenopause is also completely going to change again that hormone structure. And so you're kind of missing out on, I think it plays a little too much role in that, but it's like the quick grab of, like, well, they've got this, so that's why they're able to blank. And it's like, no. It's a lot of, and a lot more of it, I think, goes into, like, when you look at your fast twitch and muscle fibers, like, sure, you can kind of figure out what someone's going to excel at, but also there's been people who prove that odds even wrong. Of, you've got your endurance athletes that are short, and you're like, that shouldn't make sense. Like usually it's your long-legged individuals, and occasionally you'll get this short, really thick leg muscle endurance athlete, and you're like, that doesn't make sense to what we know, but you're
Right.
correctly.
There's just like more to it than just one factor. There's so many different things that we probably aren't even aware of at this point, right? Like, I mean,
and it's all the biological factors, right? You have Michael Phelps, whose wingspan was so long that he could literally touch a wall before someone else going the same pace. But we don't get upset about that factor happening. Or you've got, but meanwhile, if you like to bring it kind of into race a little bit, Simone Biles is punished for her ability that she is just short enough and so strong that she can do tricks that no one else can do, so they don't let her count those tricks. Like the bile, I think it's the bile, it's either the Simone, but one of the tricks that she's able to do, because she can literally get an extra turn in because she is so short, but also so muscular, no one else can do it. And so they you can't get scored on that trick, which makes no sense. So she,
yeah.
You've
learned
got
so much about the Olympics today. Right. I had no idea.
You've got like, freaks of genetic anomalies. There's an ultra runner, I forget his name, that he literally, he doesn't ever get lactic threshold. His lactic acid reaches
oh my gosh
point, and his body kind of reabsorbs it. So he could run forever. And they've tested and they've put him in a lab, and they're like, his lactic acid increases. And then when it reaches a certain point, his body's like, all right, we'll just pull it back in. So he can literally run forever.
That's amazing.
I was like, that's a great skill to have.
Right? How do I train for that?
Right. But he's allowed to compete in ultra races. I mean, he doesn't win every single race, but we don't limit that. So it's very interesting what we decide and don't decide our genetic factors. It's the same with ultra, like with marathoners in the Olympics. And Jen and I have talked a lot about this, of like, yeah, your hip and pelvic bone structure is going to change who is much better runner of that hamstring engagement, where your femur inserts into your hip bone is going to absolutely change who is a much better, more efficient runner. Just out the gate, bone structure is going to shape that.
Yeah.
So I think hormones creates this limitation that we're like, there's so many factors we're not even beginning to touch and see.
Yeah.
It's very fun.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like, I think there's a lot more intersex people born than naturally intersex than we can count. Like, I don't think it's, I don't think that's controversial to say.
No, so many, like, you also see, I think the thing that always cracks me up when we bring up hormones is you have so many biologists that always enter the chat and go, yeah, so many of us are not XX and XY. Like, most of the population does not fit one of those two. There is a whole range of, even before you get to intersex, that most people are not just XX or XY. Like, there's a whole range that we don't even touch. You have, it's a very interesting, like the cultural differences, because even in, I believe National Geographic did a study on a tribe that there's so many born intersex that they use gender neutral terms until puberty to see which parts drop.
Oh, wow.
Because that is just, and sometimes both happen, and that's just fine, but that is just the culture of the tribe. And so it's this, like, there are so many more folks that are not cisgendered that we just don't know. People don't even know for themselves, but even culturally, like through the world, I think there's been this very fun, like a fun realization that there's more to the world than we thought. But it's also, you have this culture right now of a lot of people being like, well, why is everyone out now and doing things now? And it was like, they've been here. They didn't feel comfortable being like,
right. That's what I think is so funny. Like, oh, like it's going to brainwash people, or it's going to make more people, I mean, if they were already and they wanted to, but it's not like, it's just,
me reading a book on running did not make me a better runner.
No, me either.
I really tried.
That's for sure.
But yeah, it's a very, and I think it's a very interesting in sports right now. You're waffling and you're seeing which sports are willing to accept, not willing to accept, is a very fascinating line. But we're teetering on that. I think there's like always that first step anytime something changes massively in the world of, there is tolerance, which is that, we're going to tolerate it. I don't want to talk about it. We'll allow it. And there's more acceptance. And I think, in terms of sports and athletics and fitness, we're teetering more towards acceptance, more towards being like, yes, come in and be a part of this. Versus just being like, fine, do your own thing, but over there, we don't want to see it. We don't want to be a part of it. And now saying, what does acceptance look like? And, you're going to have you're going to have athletics that are accepting of it, and you're going to have some that just aren't. And it's a very interesting, I think, continuous journey to see what folks do with that as the things keep growing. And I think it's the more conversations had about it, the more discussions that starts be happening of just like, yeah, it's not, no one's, we want to talk about advantages. We can talk about Michael Phelps's wingspan. Could literally reach the end of the pool. But, they don't want to talk about that. We want to talk about, oh, well, someone's trying to win. I was like, or just play a sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the issues is we've made playing a sport so privileged that then there's just become this like huge entitlement issue. It's like, so yeah, where it's like not, it's like not fun. It's not a game anymore. It's like, it's very much not a vehicle for self-improvement. It's a vehicle for, a high competitive, toxic atmosphere. Yeah, just to sum it up. I think I feel like we covered so much. I feel like we were able to you were able to help trainers, listening, be more aware of certain terms. I became aware of new things.
How important the language and how, just those few thoughts that you had about how to write things on a form and asking people how that can open up a greater conversation. And, if you genuinely want people to feel safe, that starting with accepting language and is very important.
It's a lot in the language of and even the fitness, we all have the bikini body workouts, and it was finding, it's navigating that of there's just a lot of that language out there, but it's also, if you reach to the language with fitness, if you're going towards that direction of special guest Kat. But as fitness is also kind of going into this, freeing ourselves from fat phobia, freeing ourselves from the diet culture of that opens up the conversations of, well, great, what do you want to do with your body? How do you want to move it? We're not worried about weight loss. That immediately starts to open up this category of fitness can be a lot of different things for people, and that makes people instantly feel more welcome when they go, oh, I can see myself because my goal is along these lines, or my goal is I just want to have fun in a gym and lift some weights.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love that. I think for so long, that is almost I do feel like I grew up in such a brainwashed way, that in a capitalist, very misogynistic, patriarchal way of thinking that, the only goals that you would have would be to lose weight or to look a certain way for other people's approval or validation or something. And so for the language and for the culture, I think to be shifting in this way it's amazing and really opens things up a lot for people that would have felt totally turned off by the fitness industry and would have turned off from even thinking that exercise was meant for them or health or trying to find what just joy through movement. Right. It's hard to feel really joyful when you feel like you're just trying to beat your body into submission.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah.
True. Yes. Wow. So we usually end our peach pit with a throwback.
I was curious what you were going to do for that.
So it's usually
she always keeps it from me so that I'm surprised.
But I just want to know, is there a phenomenal figure in the history of sport, movement, all the things, wellness for gender neutral, non-binary folks? Is there someone out there that represents So it's not really, it could be a throwback. It could be someone historically.
Ooh, bringing the hard question.
Or someone now,
someone just that inspires you. Who are your inspirations, or people that you in any? Yeah,
there's so many. I mean, there's an account, and I'm gonna make sure I get the name correct, that I love following. That is called Decolonizing Fitness.
Oh yeah,
I follow that account.
Yep. Yeah, it has been just a game changer in Ilya Parker is their name, of just a inviting conversation. Like they immediately, that account starting conversations across gender boundaries, but also race, and saying that we have to look at pull fitness back and see what it could be. And I think it's such a fun perspective in Karen, to look at things in that academic lens, and to look at things and say, okay, what if we peel back the layers and invite people into conversations to see what we're missing? And I think I love this idea of that. I've always loved the idea of anyone that breaks structures or breaks foundations, to say, do we have to keep this way? Like, we could not. We could just change the foundation and start something fresh and new. And so I always respect individuals that are in that same way. There is an account that I also, a lifter that I love following, who has journeyed her way back to lifting. Her name is Laura Burrito. She has Burritos and ADHD is her account. Which is but it is fun because it's talking about neurodiversity in fitness, and that individuals who are neurodiverse and ADHD, and so, but it's also fun with her because she often gets asked or assumed that she is non-binary transgender because she lifts. She's like,
oh wow,
I'm not. But she's also,
that's so interesting.
But I love following her for, she's got sassy hot takes.
I like sassy hot takes.
I love hot takes on the internet. But it's also just that interesting perspective of looking at, like, oh yeah, folks who are ADHD are going to get bored with a certain routine. So we look at, brain space. So I think a lot of, like, the folks, I think there's always lifters I've followed, and Olympic athletes I've loved following their journeys. But I think for me, it's been fun watching the folks that are breaking the system and kind of breaking it apart, or like that excites me to be like, yes, what else can we break to build it better. If like certain points you just reach a barrier. So those are all types of folks to follow.
Well,
awesome.
Amazing. Cool. I think I didn't get my throwback, but it's okay. That was amazing.
You can do 2 next time, Jen.
You get 2 next time. I stole it.
Yeah. So anyways, I think, that is a wrap. I feel really like just informed and more comfortable, probably a little bit less clumsy. And, I'm just, I just feel like that helped me a lot. So thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for sharing and for teaching us. And that's, and thank you. I really liked hearing what you had to say and learning more.
Yeah.
So where can people find you?
Yes. You can find me on Instagram, on either my personal one is r_Garmon. And then my other is Yes and Fit LLC, are my Instagrams, or I'm on Facebook as Garmon Fit. I like to keep a variety of names. In Richmond, Virginia, most often found at Tequila and Deadlifts, which is a fun job.
Yeah. Sounds fun. 2 of my favorite things.
Right?
Right?
Didn't they have like a hair salon in there too?
We do have a hair salon and a massage parlor, because it's and the gym culture is 1,000% all about inviting people in and mixing your two, that you can have fun and be fit. And so it is a great space, and is also financially inclusive of individuals. So all are encouraged to offer different rates for service workers, teachers, bartenders, etc., which I think is
nice.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's very cool.
Yeah. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, Peach Pit. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at thinkfitbefit_podcast, and you'll find Meredith and I over there on the gram. And we are a network now, so Peach Pit is its own feed. Think Fit Be Fit is its own feed, and so is the Impact Your Fitness podcast. So be sure to be following the network on your favorite podcast platform. And of course, always great to hear from you guys. And I can't wait to publish this episode. Thank you so much, Rachel.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. All
right, bye.
Bye.